Well, hello, and thank you for being here this morning. As Ms. Espin mentioned, my name is Ricky Rendon, and I'm a Business Relations Coordinator with the Texas Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehabilitation Program. My background is in clinical rehabilitation counseling, and I've been working in this space for over 10 years. So I hope to share some insights with you today. I would imagine some of you are returning employers to SEAL, right? Is there anyone here who's participating in SEAL for the first time? Okay, we have a couple. Well, thank you. I think this is such a fantastic program and very impactful. So we'll talk a little bit more about SEAL, but the main content today, we're going to have a conversation about disability awareness. First and foremost, I do want to one of the housekeeping for this presentation is that we want to foster a safe space here, right? And all of us play a role. When it comes to disabilities, everyone has different understandings and experiences with it. So we want to embrace that and see how we can move forward together, right? In increasing more understanding and awareness. Some of the objectives for this presentation include fostering an understanding that disability is in our everyday life. Defining disability and learn about reasonable accommodations. Learn about different disabilities and medical conditions that are prevalent and that exist. And we're going to develop some knowledge of person-first language and communication strategies for success in the workplace, which is going to be important, right, during the SEAL program. And we're going to learn about the VR program and the program that I represent and some services that are available, not only to just the general public, but also to you as an employer. So let's begin, right? Let's take a moment just to reflect on this question, which reads, what comes to mind when you think of the word disability? If anyone wants to share that thought, you can voice it out. Or
I only see ability.
Ability, nice. Anyone else?
Hindrance?
A hindrance, yes. Anyone else? Okay, well, think about that. Yes, a wheelchair. Yes. So keep this question in mind. We're going to take a few minutes to watch a short clip, which I enjoy.
Good morning, Bob.
Morning there, big man. Morning, Alice!
There's no need to be awkward. Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention!
Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping?
I got you.
Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What? Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't underestimate me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
No, I think he said he was gonna come.
Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath. Relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi. Would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Alice.
Right.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human.
There's no need to be awkward.
It's funny, right? And sometimes it can seem exaggerated, but the reality is that some of these scenarios are very true and relevant to people with disabilities. One of the concepts that was captured that I think is so prevalent is the concept of spread, right? When there was the deaf individual and they were whispering like he's deaf, right? Assuming that he also had other conditions. He wasn't blind, he could see them, right? But that's just an example of people question an individual's abilities based on their apparent condition, right? They question their capability to do work, their intellectual capacity, just because they see they have a disability. And that plays a big role in how they're treated, especially in the workplace. People will question and will try to treat them differently just because they see they have a disability. That's the reality, right? So how do we challenge that? And first we want to explore, so who are people with disabilities, right? I like that it was mentioned that a wheelchair comes to mind, and there's a reason for that. The universal symbol of disabilities is what you see here. It's a wheelchair and an individual, an icon sitting on it, right? So naturally, people often think that disability is a physical condition. Sorry, let me mute my computer. I think that was ringing. So naturally, right, people think something visible, something that is physical for a disability. But I want you to also take a moment to reflect and think, what was your first exposure with a disability? Could it have been when you were a child, right? Was it someone in school? Was it a relative? Was it a friend, a neighbor, right? We all had our first encounter with a disability that was apparent. And that could have shaped our perception of what a disability is. It could have been ourselves, right? Maybe you have a disability. So that plays a role in what we think and how we react and perceive disabilities. So keep that in mind, right? And see how throughout your life, disabilities have played a role. According to the Americans with Disability Act, an individual with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So this is well encompassing, right, of the physical and the mental. So any medical condition that you can imagine that falls within that realm is considered a disability. You have such a record of such an impairment, right, a diagnosis, or you're regarded as having such an impairment. So what does that statement mean? So if you have, for example, cancer, or you had a stroke. You may have recovered, you may be in remission, but those who knew you had that condition are gonna regard you as someone who had a condition, right? In some cases, someone who had a stroke and maybe worked in manufacturing or a very intense physical labor may be laid off because they don't want to have a risk of someone who has that history, right? So that's where this regarded as having a disability plays a role. It may not be an active condition, but they have a history of it, and it can come back or play a role in their life. So this is what encompasses what a disability is. And this was just signed in 1990. So just gives you a preview that the disability civil rights movement is very young in our country. And there's still a lot of growth and a lot of progress to be made. So with that, this is from the CDC, Center for Disease Control, states that 1 in 4 individuals have a disability in this country. There's more than 4 people here in this room, right, alone. And this just plays a picture that disabilities is part of the natural human condition. If you were not born with a condition, you're bound to acquire one throughout life. That's just the natural thing, right? Through either natural situations or environmental. It just happens, and we need to be aware of that. If we don't have it, someone close to us or someone in our work setting is going to have a disability. Through SEAL, for sure, you're exposed to people with disabilities and learn about how to incorporate them successfully into your workplace. So this is a very important number, right? Because if you thought that you didn't have any people with disabilities in your workplace, it could be because they haven't disclosed it or they haven't made it aware to the employer. Maybe it's not an apparent condition. So, and we'll talk a little bit about some examples of apparent and non-apparent disabilities. Some apparent disabilities can include physical disabilities, right? Of course, someone using a wheelchair or having some ambulatory difficulties. You can visibly see that they have that condition. Some neurological disorders and psychiatric conditions, right? People who have many conditions can be apparent based on their behavior and their attitudes, and sometimes that can be people can judge them based on that, right? Developmental disabilities includes an array of conditions that people are born with, such as autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome. Those are some examples of developmental disabilities, which are such prevalent conditions that can be represented in the SEAL participants, right, that are going to be going into your workplace. Someone who has paralysis or an amputation, and an amputation can be hidden, right? If I have a prosthesis in my leg, you may not know, right, because I'm wearing pants. So it can be hidden, but if you see the prosthesis, is very apparent. Someone who has low vision or is legally blind you may not know because they can still get across with independently. So you may not know unless they have a white cane or have an apparent eye condition, then you would know, but it can also be hidden. Some examples of non-apparent disabilities can include deaf and hard of hearing. You don't know someone's deaf unless you begin to communicate with them. And a lot of times, people who have low hearing or who are hard of hearing are able to communicate and speak to you and carry a conversation, but they may miss some information. And you don't know that unless they tell you, right? Or you notice that they're missing information. Someone who has low vision or is blind, we talked about that. Depression and anxiety, those conditions are very prevalent and go unnoticed. And sometimes people don't seek assistance themselves, right? having epilepsy or seizures. You don't know that unless someone's having the seizure, right? Cognitive impairments, learning disabilities, all those conditions are non-apparent unless they're conducting a task. Chronic illnesses and chronic pain, very prevalent, right? Diabetes is such a prevalent condition that exists, and many people don't consider that a disability, right? But it falls within these categories. Post-traumatic stress is another condition, and there's different reasons why someone can get PTSD, right? And that plays a big role in a person's well-being. So that falls under a non-apparent condition. So it's important to recognize as well that disabilities are very unique to the individual. Just because, and we'll talk about this later as well, but just because you know someone with any of these conditions doesn't make you an expert in the condition, right? Because it manifests itself so uniquely in a person. Disabilities is one of those things that doesn't discriminate on anything, right? On gender, on ethnicity, on socioeconomic status, nothing. No one can get away from disabilities, because it's just the largest condition that anyone can acquire, right? At any moment, any of us can become someone with a disability, and it intersects with any background that you can imagine that exists. So with that, it also, how someone processes acquiring a condition looks very different, right? It has to go through the stages of acceptance, right? And seek help. And that in itself is a journey, right? That we respect, right? We have to respect, because society is not designed to be inclusive sometimes. And it's it's a box of, you have to do certain things to be productive and to appear to be a productive citizen. And that causes a challenge to how people can thrive and be included and have access to things. So naturally, there's a lot of pride, and people don't want to disclose or admit they have a disability. And sometimes that causes more issues for the person, right? It exacerbates the condition, makes it more challenging, and doesn't make them able to advance. So and there's also other barriers, right? And you'll see with some of the participants, the role their parents play in their independence, right? That's a piece to consider. Some parents are strong advocates, right? And they, and that will play a role uniquely where they either want to protect their child because they have been bullied, or they have been exposed to some areas that they don't want their children to be exposed to, and that's understandable, right? But there's also some that want them to be independent and want them to be exposed and treated like everyone else, and in order for them to transition successfully into post-secondary life, right? So you'll see a combination of those things, and all that plays a role in the individual, right? And that's something important to consider and be aware of. So with the disability civil rights movement came the people first language, because there was a lot of derogatory terms that are still alive today that have been used to basically treat people with disabilities like second-class citizens, like they're different from, a non-disabled person. So words like handicapped, which is, I'm sure, a term that you all have heard and seen, is not really a positive term, right? Because it focuses on the individual being the problem, right? Your disability is an issue that prevents you from having access. Instead of calling someone handicapped, you want to just say a person with a disability. That is what's politically correct. That is what should be standard best practice in language. If you need to identify, this population. So a person with a disability, a student with a disability, an employee with a disability, you exchange that as needed, right, or as appropriate to the situation. There is a movement of identity first, right, language, where people are more embraced and accept and prefer to be called disabled, right, and that's also something to consider. But what that tells us is that every individual has a preference, right? I like to share an example of my ethnicity, right? I can say I'm Latino, Mexican American, Hispanic, Chicano, right? There's all these terms that I can use for my ethnicity, but I'm going to choose the one that I'm most comfortable with, and that's the one I'll use. And in a similar way for disabilities, people can choose what they're most comfortable with, and you can ask them, right? Some people prefer to be called autistic, but if you don't know, you want to use a person with autism. MR, mentally retarded, that used to be an actual medical term, right? The diagnoses. It wasn't until just a couple years ago that was removed from the medical terminology. So some people still have that diagnosis on their record. So the proper term to use for this disability is a person with an intellectual disability, intellectually developmentally delayed, IDD, which again, it's a very prevalent and common condition that you'll see present in a lot of the participants for SEAL. And then the last one there says wheelchair bound. No one is bound by their equipment or anything like that. So you want to use a person who uses a wheelchair or replace wheelchair with whatever equipment that they're using. The key thing is to always emphasize the person, not their disability, right? A disability plays a big role and it's part of who they are, but it does not define them, right? And we should not be focusing on a disability. And it's difficult, right? Especially if you're new to this space, it stands out, right? It's very apparent and you want to be careful and you want to be attentive to it. But just remember that they're just a person like anyone else seeking this experience, an opportunity, and you want to focus on that, right? Yes, ma'am.
Are copies of this going to be available to us?
They can be. For copies, yes.
Yes, and we'll also have this on our landing page. It's going to be recorded, so you'll be able to reference back if you have any questions. The actual physical copies? Physical copies, we can get some
sure.
To you.
So what is a reasonable accommodation? So we learn a little bit about different conditions. So this is something you may be wondering as an employer, right? A reasonable accommodation is a change in the workplace or in the way things are customarily done to assist an individual with a disability in the employment process. So all of us have policies and structures and processes in place that are, very defined and structured. And sometimes that process can cause barriers to someone who has either visible limitations or auditory limitations, right, that may not allow them to participate fully in this process that you have in place. So some areas to consider is during the application process, right? Sometimes the application may have fill-in boxes or drop-down options that may not be accessible for screen reading software for someone who's blind, right? So there you're missing out on an applicant who may be a great fit but couldn't get through the application process due to accessibility barriers, right? So that's one example. Accommodations enable someone to perform the essential functions of a job. So someone may not be able to lift a certain amount of weight, but is there other ways that they can continue to do that with equipment, right? So language like that on the expectations of a job, looking at alternative solutions that can allow someone to complete the task, but perhaps in different methods that were not previously used before. They can enable an employee to enjoy equal benefits and privileges of employment. And that's the key thing. You want everyone in your workspace to be successful, to thrive, and have equal access and benefits to what every employee should have, right? A lot of the technology today that exists was designed for people with disabilities. One example is the automatic doors that open, right? We all have gone through those, and maybe none of us here use a wheelchair, right? But we've benefited from it. Or an elevator, screen reading, or text-to-speech, or speech-to-text on our phone, right? That's something for blind people, and we all have used, or at least I use it once in a while. So all this technology is very necessary to ensure people with disabilities have equal access, but those who don't have those conditions can also benefit from those things. And in a similar way, when you make modifications to your workspace that allow for equal access for people, tends to be a strategy that enhances processes in your company for everyone. It increases the accessibility for all. Some examples of accommodations can include, for high tech, installing a ramp, having video phones, having vehicle modifications. And that's many of these things are things that we can offer through our agency to individuals. As CCTV, that's a magnification TV where you put a document and you can see it up on the screen. An OCR is a text-to-speech, so someone who needs to interact with the computer, and maybe they can't type or they can't see, can benefit from that. Screen reader, magnification, and dictation is very important for those who are blind or who have a learning disability, because they're able to interact with the computer without having to see it, right? Low-tech accommodations can include an adjusted work schedule, telework, the lighting, right? Someone who has sensory difficulties may need dimmer lights. Having a pillow for a chair or an adjusted chair, tactile dots or stickers for someone who's blind and they can identify what they need to have access to, offering large print, documents, or a keyboard, using earplugs or noise canceling headphones, using a recorder for information retention, right? And we'll talk about who did this survey, but a survey was conducted for thousands of employers across the country, asking them how much they've spent on accommodations, and it was determined a median cost for accommodations to be one of these options, either $5,000, $10,000, $300, or $1,000. Does anyone want to take a guess of what the right answer is? Yes.
$300.
That's right. It is $300. So on average, accommodations are not expensive, right? When sometimes people think that people with disabilities can cost a high liability, very expensive, but for the most part, it's a one-time accommodation and it could be very inexpensive. On average, it was $300, but it was much less than that on an individual basis. Those who conducted the survey was Ask Jan, the Job Accommodation Network, which I think is a fantastic resource to all of you. This is a free resource where you can go in and it gives you options. There's some tabs on the top right that says A to C list or accommodation search. Based on the disability that you're working with, it gives you recommendations on the type of accommodations that individual can benefit from. If it's not informative enough for the type of job they're doing, you can have some free consultation with a representative. You'll let them know what the situation is and what type of questions you have, and they'll give you some feedback and recommendation. They also try to help you with what the law says, right? And try to help you in avoiding any sort of issues with the law, right? So any questions you have, this is a great space where you can go into and get more information. Yes, ma'am.
Recently, and it just caught my attention because I knew someone who had problems hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So I called that person who lives in North Carolina, but I don't know if it's here in our area. But I noticed there was a commercial with a phone, and I thought, man, that is great, where the phone rings and it has the screen on the side of the phone, and when they pick up, whatever that person's saying types out in big letters for the person who can't hear well and is able to talk back. And I thought that was like the greatest thing I ever seen. So I'm not sure, I just saw it not too long ago, but I did call my friend to tell her because she lives in North Carolina. But do we have things like that here?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, in this center, it's still in working phases, right, of bringing more staff in here. But in the lab here, there's an accessible station, and it has a video relay phone on the accessible station that has what you just described, where for someone who's deaf, they can access that video phone and call a hearing person. Like, they can call any of you on the phone, and an interpreter will appear on their screen as the middle person, translating the conversation to the deaf person and to the hearing person. And there's also the captioning phone, where it captures the conversation, and they'll see the text, the inscription there. Yes, that it types itself, and that is for someone who's low hearing, right? Maybe they can hear some stuff, but they miss some information, and just to ensure that is a great accommodation that exists. So yes, those are things that are important, because sometimes I remember this one case where we had a deaf participant in SEAL, actually, and they were doing the role of an office assistant. And the employer was so open, they're like, of course, we welcome them, but how is she going to do the job if she can't hear the phone? And that's such an important, critical part of the job. They were wanting to remove that task from her job description. But it was like, wait a minute, if this is an essential function of the job, let's explore how she can do the job, right? And some of the accommodations were what we just mentioned. That allowed her to do her job successfully through that accommodation that exists, right? And she was successful doing the job, and she actually got hired because the employer was open to exploring that accommodation. And it's a no-cost thing, by the way. There's video relay services that are a no cost that can be implemented to your business. So we'll go through some tips on some conditions, disabilities that I think are so prevalent, especially representative in participants that go through SEAL, but also accommodations that are just generally applicable to everyone, I think. First and foremost is the autism spectrum disorder, right? Here's some suggestions that you can consider when working with some of these participants, right? Many times, individuals with autism may not respond well to questions, or they may be very short and direct, and it may not be well reflected in an interview, right? So instead, have them the opportunity to demonstrate, have an interactive process where they can show you their abilities without having to verbally tell you. So if there's any opportunity to implement that, I think it's very impactful. It's more representative on their ability. Having verbal instructions in writing. And this is something that is not only in writing, but considering, it's okay. Considering different learning styles is important. Someone may be very attentive to hearing verbal instruction, but it may help to also process it in writing, or visually in a video instruction. Having different formats just enhances the way of processing and retaining information. Slowing down questions, giving more time to think, and assuring that taking time is okay, right? Sometimes we can be in a very fast-paced environment, right, and expect things to be quick, but some of these individuals may take more time. So exploring a way where this makes sense to the business, right, to the process. Maybe questions and processes need to be prepared in advance before they're in the field, right? So exploring ways to accommodate this, understanding that they may need more time to process and respond to some of the questions. So maybe not expecting the response right away, but checking back in later and seeing how they process the question. Having the same few people ask questions and give direction. And this is applicable to anyone, right? Especially considering that you have youth in your workspace. Having the same people checking in on them and asking the questions to build that rapport and that trust is very important. Having that connection reduces anxiety and can increase verbal ability. We have been amazed by previous cohorts where we have seen individuals with autism who have been identified as nonverbal, right? And throughout these experiences of SEAL, we have seen them come out of their shell and be treated like any other individual and put their skills to play, and have gained that comfort to communicate and and that has been just impressive due to this opportunity. I do think, right, in talking about systemic inclusion in the workplace, this opportunity here is so impactful, and I just want you to know the huge role you're playing in the lives of these individuals, because right now in this stage of their life, they're being exposed, some of them for the very first time, to a work setting, right? And they get to learn a lot about their abilities that they didn't know before, probably, right? So this can be so impactful in how they perceive themselves with life after high school. Do they want to go to post-secondary education, directly to employment? Some of them who have the right skills and abilities for your company, you may find them to be a great match, and you may even extend a job offer if you feel that's appropriate. So there's so many possibilities, and it's always a win-win situation, because at the end of the day, these individuals get the opportunity to learn a new skill, to put their abilities to the test, and you get to be exposed to talent, to this unique talent to your workplace, and you get to learn from that as well. Not only about ways to enhance processes in your workplace, but it's also something I've worked with many different companies throughout this region. When disability talent is exposed to your general workforce, there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of recognition from employees that say, my employer supports people with disabilities. And there's a level of comfort that they experience where they may feel more comfortable disclosing to the employer about their condition and explore ways to be more successful because they have hidden their condition and have faced challenges. How many times have we experienced pain, right? Have we been sore, but we just go through it because there's no other thing to do, right? We just deal with it. And many times when people have more significant disabilities, they just deal with it, right? It's like they accept it as part of their life and as a barrier they have to carry without seeking accommodations that can make them more successful, right? And it just, what happens, right? So moving on with this list, allow lots of repetitive practice learning job tasks, so the information is more automatic and does not require in-depth thought or process. So having, if you all have incorporated an interview process to the participants that you're accepting, having some sort of exposure to what type of job they're having, or when it comes to the training process, if you can expose them to the information and have them practice, this can be very impactful in retaining the information. Give options of what to do and say if they don't have the answer to the question. So when you're asking a question, and this is very helpful to any of the participants or anyone really, giving the option. If they're struggling to respond, can it be, think of what options are available to the question and give them those two options. That way they are able to process that better and make a clear decision. Consider the use of noise-canceling headphones or remote work for those with sensory sensitivity. And there's a lot of different ways to go about this specific challenge. For deaf and hard of hearing, there's a wide range of hearing loss and communication methods. If you do not know the individual's preferred communication method, ask. A lot of individuals are able to, you can text, you can write, they can read lips, they can verbally communicate, right? A lot of individuals are able to still carry on with having a conversation. Just ask, right, and see what their preference is. It is okay to use the terms deaf or deaf person, right? This is the exception to the people first language rule that we talked about earlier. To get the attention of a person with a hearing loss, call his or her name. If there's no response, you can lightly touch them on the arm or the shoulder, or wave your hand. Get in a place where they can see you and to get their attention. Always face and speak to the individual, not their interpreter or their companion. This was highlighted in the video, right? And many times we can see that, in not just with deaf and hard of hearing, but with anyone with a disability. We can gravitate, if they have a job coach at the side, if you feel the gravitation to speak about the individual, if they're there directly to the job coach, challenge yourself and directly communicate with the individual, rather than their trainer, their parent, their companion. Challenge them to have more autonomy, right? More confidence and ownership. That's what we want them to gain from this experience. Use facial expressions and body language to communicate the emotion of a message, such as displeasure or disapproval. With this community, facial expressions is key, right? They're very animated because that's how they relay their message, right? They can, just like when we communicate, we use our tone to amplify how we're feeling, and our body language. It's the same for people who are deaf. Facial expressions and body language is more important and animated. Consider alternative ways to provide information, such as writing, email, texting, or faxing are great ways to ensure accuracy and decrease frustration. And this is important for everyone, right? Sometimes we can relay a verbal information notice or announcement, and that's it. Those who didn't hear it or weren't there didn't capture that information, right? Or who didn't write it down, they may have misheard or not captured all of the information. So sending it in different methods is very important, just to ensure that everyone got it. For physical mobility impairments, don't push, touch, or lean on a person's wheelchair. It's part of their personal space, and it's a safety hazard. Sometimes people are crossing the street on their wheelchair, and someone will come in and push them along the way, and it can cause more danger than help. If you plan on having a long conversation with a person in a wheelchair, try to locate a chair. That way you meet them eye to eye level. But that's if you're having a long conversation. But if it's something short, you can do it standing. Keep the ramps and wheelchairs accessible and accessible doors to your building unlocked and unblocked. When and I say this because sometimes the only ramp to a building is in the back of the building where the garbage cans are, and sometimes it's blocked. So keeping that in mind, right? If if somebody needs the ramp, it should be accessible. Always feel free to shake hands. And this is because when we think of physical impairments, it's not just the legs that can be impacted. Someone could have a spinal cord injury and can be paralyzed from the neck down and can have very limited mobility in their hands, but they can still be you can still shake their hand. People who are paralyzed from the neck down, they can still drive independently. There's extensive vehicle modifications that we can do for someone so that they can, with that minimal mobility that they have in their hands, they can drive a vehicle independently. Be aware of a person's reach limits. Place as many items as possible within their grasp. I knew someone who had that condition. He had a spinal cord injury and was paralyzed. And the main accommodation he needed was to have a rope in the restroom so he can pull it. And that was the accommodation. He was able to do pretty much everything else independently. For blind and visual impairments, identify yourself when interacting, entering, or leaving a room. If your company, if you use a lot of virtual communications, this is also another example where if you're going to speak, identify yourself. That way they know who's speaking. Address individuals who are blind by name, especially in a crowded place. Feel free to use words that refer to vision. It may be uncomfortable, right, if you're speaking to someone who's blind and you say, "Did you see the movie?" and then you feel awkward. That's like, "Oh, did I say something offensive or rude?" But no, that's totally appropriate and acceptable. Never take hold of a white cane or a pet service animal without permission. And this was highlighted in the video, right? Give clear directions and share information on surroundings. This is an area where I'm terrible at because I can point, I'm like over there. But if someone's blind, you want to give clear directions, to the left, to the right, in front of you. Using the clock method is important, especially, if they're they're eating, right? You can say at 9 o'clock, you'll have your soft drink. At 3 o'clock, you'll have your utensils, etc. The clock method can be very helpful in giving directions. For assistance with mobility, offer assistance with mobility by using a sighted guide, and you can offer your elbow or your shoulder to guide someone, especially if they're going to the restroom here in this building for the first time. You can offer yourself as a sighted guide to walk them over. Offer to read written information. So let's say you're at a restaurant with someone who's blind and you have a long menu and they can't see it, right? So you offer to read it. Instead of reading line by line, think about how you would read it naturally. You scan a document and you look at the sections, and that's how you want to communicate it to the person. So, you can say, this menu is extensive. There's 100 options, but you go by the sections. There are appetizers, the entrees, the desserts, mention the specials. Say the sections and then ask them, what do you want me to focus on, right? And you go from there. You don't have to read line by line. You summarize first what you see, how you would scan with your vision, and then you summarize that, and you then go from there. Some things to consider generally. Disability does not reflect or define capability, right? If you have met a person with a disability, you have met one person with a disability. And everyone's so unique, right? And has their own personality and their own process of accepting and all of that, right? It's very unique to an individual. Ask questions and do not make assumptions. Naturally, you will make assumptions, but give the person the autonomy and ask them, right? You may be surprised that you were wrong. Direct your attention to the individual, not their interpreter or their companion. Use alt text. So alt text is, if you have electronic documents and there's images, have a description if someone is using screen reading software. That way, instead of their software saying there's a blank box or object, it can actually give a description for them. Large print can be important, and large print is a font size of 16 to 18 on an Arial or Verdana font. This is generally best practice. Consider different learning styles for information retention, right? Not just doing things verbally, but also considering other ways through written instruction, through visual, auditory, all those concepts are important to consider. So I mentioned, right, that I was in this space for many years, but I still make mistakes. I find myself making mistakes in different areas. But that's okay, right? Give yourself some grace. It's not the end of the world. People with disabilities face this every day. And you just want to recover from that and ask, right? And if you made a mistake, apologize and ask how you could do better. This is one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, and it reads, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better," right? And I think this can apply to anything in life. So now we'll transition. I do want to, the last portion of this presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about the Vocational Rehab Program, in case you're not aware of or familiar with it. Our agency has been in existence for over 100 years. It started after the soldiers from World War I were returning and trying to transition to civilian life, but they had amputations, they had disabilities, and no support to return to work. So they advocated, and that's when there was funding in place to support them in their rehabilitation process to return to work. Over time, the program has expanded, it has enhanced, it has grown to ensure that anyone who has a disability, whether they acquired it through their service, or they were born with it, or they acquired it in their life, they had access to be served so that they can prepare for, obtain, maintain, and advance in meaningful employment. So note that this is not just for people who are unemployed, who haven't had employment right in their life, but also people who are successfully working, but maybe are facing a challenge with retaining their job or advancing to a higher level position because of their disability. So all these individuals can potentially qualify for services. There's 4 main questions to determine who's eligible for this program. Do you have a physical or mental impairment? Right, first question. Is this impairment getting in the way of work in any capacity? Do you require VR services to prepare for, obtain, maintain, or advance in employment? So the services can include a surgery, it can include counseling, it can include guidance on the accommodation or work experience, whatever it is. Do you require any of that to be successful? And last question, do you want to work? Many times what we see, and there's this term which sounds so negative, but is real, when people graduate to the couch, right, from high school. If some individuals receive Social Security benefits, they have this idea that they can't work or they'll lose their benefits. That's, for one, not real. That's not true. People can work and retain benefits. But sometimes that happens, where people have this fear of that they shouldn't work, for various reasons also. But a key thing for our program is the individual has to have the desire to work. If they answered yes to all those questions, then they're pretty much eligible, right, for services. Even some people who maybe have lived with this thought that they have a condition, but they've never been diagnosed. If you have if you've been experiencing something, you're able to still come, and we'll help you get that diagnosis. So you can have. We contract providers to support people, right? So that's a thing. Notice that income is not a consideration for eligibility. That's not part of it. We don't. If you're working and you have a decent salary, that does not determine whether you qualify or not.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So say you do have an employee who needs maybe like a surgery, they have this physical issues going on and they need a surgery to continue working. Maybe they can't sit at their desk long or things like that. Would, if they meet all those qualifications, they be eligible to have like that surgery paid for?
Right.
At the hospital?
Yes. So, and it's important for someone who has who needs that type of surgery, like a back surgery or whatever it's needed, for them to apply as soon as possible, because we don't reimburse, right? Once they pay for the surgery, that's it. So as soon as someone knows they need a surgery or support, they want to apply as soon as possible, right? That way they can be supported along the way.
They have to be, kind of piggyback to her question. Do they have to be employed by you?
No.
In order for that for them to be eligible for that?
No, this is open to any Texan. So the vocational rehab program is national, right? This is a federal program and state-funded program. So anyone who is who can legally work in this country can receive the services.
And do y'all work with veterans?
Yes. That's the foundation of our agency, and we continue to serve veterans. We see that there's intersectionality, right? Intersection between different identities, veterans, foster youth, and many other communities that exist. We focus on the disability. That's the main requirement. For the SEAL program, so we do start serving individuals at the age of 14, and there's no cap on age. We have individuals that are in their 80s and still want to work, so we support them in however we can. So for the SEAL program, is for a specific population that we serve. It's for individuals who are students with a disability between the ages of 14 and 22, and they must be enrolled either in a secondary or post-secondary program. They must be a VR consumer, a customer, and they must be receptive to counseling and guidance about the importance of appropriate workplace behavior, and they must be motivated to participate in the work-based learning program, the Summer Earn and Learn. So this is the specific group that you're going to be working with for the Summer Earn and Learn. There's many, we do serve older individuals, and we have work experience programs for them as well. So that's available. Accommodation and trainers that are offered for these individuals, it can include adaptive aids, timers, American Sign Language interpreters, the work experience trainers, also known as job coaches. Depending on, of course, all of this is individualized to your workspace, right? You're the employer. We have a dual customer model, right? And as the employer, you're a customer as well. And we want to respect your space and customize our services to what makes sense to your company, right? To your site. So we strategize that with you. And that's why communication is key in this process. You have such wonderful business relations specialist here with Workforce Solutions Coastal Bend, who serve as that liaison to communicate with you and work with all the moving parts that are behind SEAL. It's a very thoughtful process that takes a whole year to plan, right, Imelda? So there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes, and all of us are working together to ensure that we do anything possible for the participant and for the employer to be successful with this experience.
Can I ask a question
Yes, ma'am.
about the trainer, or are we going to go more into depth about?
You can ask, yeah.
So the trainer is expected to do, like for example, we have a recreation center, so we follow a checklist, a cleaning checklist. We do flashcards with the children. So is a trainer to do all of that with the work experience, or does that trainer guide the work experience? Like, now we sweep this corner, now we mop the corner?
Right.
Okay.
So the work experience trainer, and great question, thank you, is intended there to assist them with that transition, right? They're their shadow. They don't do their job, or they don't do any work for them. They're there to observe and see how to address any challenges that come out from the experience, and ensure that they address those social skills, that they have methods in place to be successful with retaining the information and doing the job successfully. Work experience trainers are intended to fade out, right? They're not intended to be there permanently, or it's on a need-by basis. Not everyone needs a work experience trainer, right? It just depends on the individual. And if somebody doesn't have one, but let's say an issue comes up, then they should request one, right? To go to the site. It just depends, right? They're just there to support you in addressing some of the concerns you may have with the individual, and placing practices in place to overcome them successfully.
And I'm sure this is, they're vetted, their background checked.
Yes.
Are they employees of the workforce? Are they state employees?
So they're contractors.
Okay.
So we do have a system where individuals have to have certain certifications for them to be a provider for us. And once they meet those requirements, they're a vetted provider for us who can be supporting our customers.
Are we able to see the qualifications of the work trainer?
Sure, yes. They have record of that, and you can request that, of those trainings, certifications that they take. Here on the screen, you'll see our referral process. If you or someone you know would benefit from any of the services or information that I shared, right? And now knowing that this goes beyond the youth, the 14 to 22, if you can think of someone who would benefit, these are some ways to connect them. The statewide call center is 512-936-6400, and a representative will guide you to that initial contact, right? And see what the office nearest to you is, and what the process may look like, and things like that. That's my recommended first step. But if someone prefers to look it up online, there's a website to locate your nearest office, and also the Start My VR QR code, where you can do that electronically, and someone will get back to you. One of the challenges we face is that sometimes when our staff is trying to call back, the recipient doesn't answer and never gets back to the individual. So know that once one of our local staff will get the referral, they'll try to contact you to schedule that appointment for the application. Here we have a map of the Texas Workforce Commission is such an umbrella term for different divisions and programs that exist. Sometimes people automatically think of the Unemployment Office, which is a division under the Texas Workforce Commission. But here what I'm highlighting is on the left we have a map with different colors, the 28 workforce boards. Here in Corpus we have the Coastal Bend, which is hosting and has put this together. Wonderful board that you get to be involved with. So all these boards are tasked with the same goal of supporting job seekers and employers to be successful, right, in the Texas workforce, and extensive amount of services that they provide to ensure that success. On the right, we have the vocational rehab map. There are 6 regions throughout the state. I represent Region 6. So my coverage area is from San Antonio down to the Valley. So I have quite a large coverage area that I cover. My role is to be that liaison to the business sector in having a successful pipeline, disability talent pipeline to the workplace. So anything that I can do to support you in your future endeavors for systemic inclusion of disability talent, you can reach out to me or my counterpart, which I'll share his contact later. So some of the business services that we offer can include disability awareness training. So today we experience one of those, right? We do have a more extensive modules. If you want to have activities at your workplace on disability awareness, we can explore other trainings or customized trainings to your company. Assistance on retention of disability talent. Examples were mentioned, right, of someone who may need a surgery, who may need equipment. Those are individuals that can be referred to us for providing assistance. Job analysis. If you're looking at hiring disability talent and being more active with that, but you want to have us to go in to do an observation, do an analysis, just to see, be more intentional, right, about successful referrals, we can do that. The referral of qualified applicants. We have a lot of individuals that we're serving. Our counselors, we have like 300 staff throughout our region, and each counselor has a caseload of about 100 individuals that they see. So we have a lot of talent, broad range of representation. So if you have vacancies that you're looking to fill, you would like to explore disability talent as an option, as a solution, you can contact us and we can see if we have any qualified applicants for the positions. Internship opportunities. This Summer Earn and Learn is one of them, but we have other options as well that exist for adults and for youth, but outside of summer. And of course, anything we can do to strategize and I like to say that, you know, again, with the message at the beginning, no judgment. We're here to meet you where you are and support you in getting where you want to be. So I'm not ADA police or disability, you know, anything. I'm just here to support in any way I can in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, which many times we forget that disability is part of that. The We Hire Ability program, just want to mention that this is something that launched in 2021 to recognize employers who have individuals with disabilities that are employed and that comprise 10% of your workforce. If this is something that you think you qualify for, the application is very simple, just a couple questions, and you can receive a recognition, the decal, the We Hire Ability decal, and you can highlight on your website, on your store, and you get recognized by the commissioner that represents employers. Here is my counterpart, Nicholas Casillas. He's the other business relations coordinator who, he's actually from this area. So he's your point of contact for the Valley, for the Corpus Coastal Bend area. And then myself, I've been in the position for 3 years, going on 3 years now, and I'm also here to assist. So the two of us represent the Vocational Rehab Division, but of course through your local contacts here, we work together to streamline and support you in any way we can. How are we with time? Okay. We have some pop quiz to conclude today's presentation. So you sit down next to Dan at lunchtime. You start conversing with him and notice he has trouble speaking. Do you pretend you understand what was said? Do you smile and get up as fast as you can? Or do you repeat what you understood and ask him to repeat the rest of the information? That's right. And this can be awkward, right? You may think this is common sense, right? But It can be awkward sometimes when someone's having a verbal challenge and you can see the frustration and you just want to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I got it. But that does more harm than help, right? So you do want to explore, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Can you repeat it again, or can you write it down? Try to explore ways, right, to ensure that you retain the information, that you understand the information, and that you have a process in place. You see Jose, who is in a wheelchair, and you need to ask him a question. Should you kneel down and ask him the question, pull his wheelchair to get his attention, or simply ask him the question?
See, unless you're going to have a full conversation, then it'd be A.
Yes, so you're right. So if you're just asking a question, you simply ask the question. But if that leads to a long conversation, then you want to pull a chair and get at eye level. You meet a new teammate who is deaf, and she has an interpreter with her. Do you speak to the interpreter? Do you maintain eye contact with the new teammate that is deaf? Or do you look back and forth between them? Yes, you maintain eye contact with the individual. And this applies to, right, every candidate. Give them that respect, dignity, that they're the individual you're working with, not their interpreter, not their companion. You're giving instructions to John, but you see him struggling to understand. Do you talk louder? Do you talk slower? Or do you repeat the instruction until John understands it? So this captures that concept, right, of spread, that you assume how you think you can help. And I think it's a trick question, honestly, because instead of repeating it over and over, what if he simply just doesn't understand, right? And you may want to explore first, how can I provide you this information better?
Maybe talk louder.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're talking too fast, so you need to talk a little bit slower.
That's right, yeah.
It is a trick question.
It is a trick question, that's right. Maybe you need an interpreter. So it's something to consider, right? Bill is blind and you think he needs assistance. Do you hold Bill by the arm and guide him to his destination? Do you grab his cane and guide him where he needs to go? Or do you ask if he needs assistance?
See.
That's right. You always ask. And this is crazy. I remember I had a friend, and we were in a place where there was a metro system, and somebody grabbed her, pulled her because they thought that she was gonna get into danger. She had a system, of course. She knew where she was and she knew what she was gonna do. But sometimes people just automatically think they know what's best, and they can get in the way of a person's safety and process. So always asking is key. When you meet someone with a disability, it's best practice to try and help them by thinking of types of jobs they can do.
False. I would say false because
you don't want
should
to
always make accommodations for them to be able to do whatever job is needed.
That's right. You can't assume they can't do the job, right? You want them to do the job, and then if they need help, if they need accommodations, have a process in place for them to come to you to request them, right? And this should be something in place for anyone, right? For everyone in your workplace, they should know what is the process of requesting accommodations. And giving that general knowledge is key, right? And if they need accommodation or if they need to explore different ways of doing their job, they should come to you for that. Okay, that concludes my presentation. So, thank you so much for your time, and I hope this was something helpful and beneficial to you.
Did anyone else have any other questions for Ricky?
I did. So you talk about the accommodations conversation. Does that need to take place after employment is offered? Can it take place during interview process? What's the best?
That's a great question. And we're seeing a change where some employers do ask up front, right? Do you need accommodations? Do you have a disability? Of course, these are optional questions, right? Historically, people with disabilities have had this guidance or preference of disclosing once they had a job offer to avoid discrimination as much as possible, right? But when the employer is open about it, right, and has processes in place to disclose and to share, request accommodations, we encourage them to do so, because that usually shows that the employer is supportive, that they embrace disabilities, and that they want to accommodate as early as possible. So it's up to the individual, of course, it's always up to the individual to disclose and to initiate that conversation. But allowing the space and opportunity, I think, is helpful and as early as possible.